Before the story of the life of Jesus even begins in the Gospel of John, the author presents us with what amounts to a cosmic view of God's interaction with the world across all of time, stretching even to a time before time, when the cosmos itself was created. The Word became flesh, he said, and God made his dwelling place, no longer somewhere out there in the stars, but among us. This was God incognito, made now fully human, in order to enable all of us to also become children of God. The scope of this vision is breathtaking, barely captured in the words, but he concedes one caveat to all this, which is that our ability to see the fullness of God's intention remains constrained. No one has ever seen God, he says, but the one and only Son, who is himself God. Therefore, the pathway to grace and truth for all of us is to pay attention to the life and teachings of Jesus, because this is how we can know God, for he alone has made him known. One scholar, I remember, liked to use the phrase, "How then should we live?" as his key to unlocking the Bible. He saw the Bible as the record of how, in many different times and places, humanity has wrestled with and then answered this one question: how then should we live? John's Gospel answers this question by saying that because we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth, therefore we too now are full of grace and truth in our lives. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. We must also understand, however, that there is a vital relationship that exists between grace and truth. They are not really separate things, and in his life, Jesus fully embodied them both simultaneously. Grace and truth form a single way of being that is both descriptive of Jesus and applicable to us as well. His grace toward us is not a response to our worthiness, our effort, or our achievements. It is God's unmerited favor bestowed upon us without bargaining. It is mercy given without prerequisites and love that acts to bring about wholeness in us. In fact, grace always comes first, before we ever ask. What sin, fear, or shame broke in us, the grace of God now is able to repair in us. God's goal is relational, but it's also transformational. It is this grace given first that then makes truth bearable. Without grace, truth just feels like judgment. It is grace that creates the safety in which truth can be heard. Or as one person put it, grace says, you are loved, so that truth can say, and you are capable of more. If that just sounds like good parenting to you, you are absolutely right. It is. If your child says or does something wrong, then the first thing they need to hear you say is, I love you. And then you can tell them why they should never do that again. Likewise, whenever we deal with one another for whatever reason, the same thing should be true for us. Grace must come first, because it is grace that prepares the soil for truth to take root. Truth is about living in alignment with our values. Truth does not allow us to ignore, hide, distort, or manipulate reality solely for the sake of our own personal or political gain. Truth, in this particular case, means not pretending that destructive behavior is ever okay. Grace and truth must always work together in tandem, because grace without truth becomes sentimentality, and truth without grace becomes weaponry. However, when held together in some mysterious alchemy, grace and truth become a means of healing. In our daily life and interaction with each other, embodying grace and truth means refusing to give up on people. It means seeing who they are fully, but also loving them unconditionally, and neither shaming nor ever indulging them. This is the pattern of interaction that Jesus himself set for us. His most basic message, of course, was that we should love God and love one another, but we also must embrace truth, because the truth, when it is delivered with love, is what can set us free. So how then should we live? We should live in the light rather than the darkness, choosing truth over deception, courage over fear, and transparency over hiddenness, but then also follow the command of Jesus to love one another. We are only able to do this by trusting the one who is the way, the truth, and the life to guide us. The lives that we live should take their form from our trust in him and our desire to become more like him. That is what makes us the children of God. And that means we have to embrace both grace and truth together in the way that we live. Some of the most popular modern catchphrases that we use now within the context of the church are really just attempts to create and practice this combination of grace and truth. We are called to radical hospitality, for instance, which just means meeting people with openness rather than suspicion. We are called to practice compassionate seeing, which means loving the person before we ever try to fix any problem. And we are encouraged to maintain a non-defensive presence, which means refusing to let either our own fear or our ego set the tone for our encounter with other people. Each one of these is really just another means of embodying God's grace in our lives. And we are also called to align our lives with what we believe to be the truth, and to practice honest speech, learning to speak truth to one another without being cruel. Grace means loving unconditionally, but never pretending that destructive behavior by anyone for any purpose is ever okay. And truth is never optional for us, even if someone might take offense when we speak the truth. Jesus was always honest with his disciples and also truthful in his critiques of the powerful. Even his harshest words were never intended to humiliate. Instead, they were meant to liberate. Truth as spoken by Jesus was always an expression of love as well. He never lied to spare feelings, but he also never used truth as a weapon to dominate or cause harm. Jesus doesn't alternate between grace and truth, like they are two different modes of being. He embodies them both simultaneously in every encounter. For instance, he told the Samaritan woman at the well everything she had ever done, but he did not shame her. He protected the woman caught in adultery from condemnation and harm, but then also called her to a new way to live. And you remember how he honored Nicodemus for coming to see him, but then also challenged him to rethink his assumptions. When it comes to faith and relating to Jesus, it is always grace that opens the door and truth that invites us to be changed. His grace is not soft and his truth is not harsh. That should be our goal in life as well, to combine grace and truth as the way that we can live and relate to one another. Once upon a time, there was a manager at a big firm who noticed that one of their employees was not getting their work done and missing deadlines. She considered just avoiding the issue to keep the peace, or maybe outright confronting them and telling them to shape up. What she finally chose to do was another option altogether. She called this person into her office and said, "I want you to know I value you and the work you bring to this team. I've noticed you haven't seemed like yourself lately, and I'm concerned about you." This maintained their dignity and let them know that she cared about them. Then she went on to say, "I need to talk honestly with you about the missed deadlines and the work that's been falling behind, because it is affecting the team and we need to address it." This was honest clarity. She didn't soften the truth, but she didn't weaponize it either. "Can you help me understand what has been going on?" she asked them. In this way, she also made room for the truth behind the truth. There quite often is something that we don't know. The employee then explained that they had been caring for their father after a medical crisis and that they were feeling overwhelmed, embarrassed, and afraid to ask for help. So now that the truth was out there, grace could make room for change. Thank you for telling me that, she replied. Now we still need to make a plan to be sure that the work gets done and that the team isn't carrying this alone. This was a means of making sure that grace did not become permission. Let's adjust your workload for the next month, she added, and pair you with someone who can help. We'll check in weekly after that to see how you are doing. Remember, she said, you are not alone in this. That was very wise management. And I'm pretty sure that God, more or less, uses the very same approach with us. We are not less accountable to God for our behavior because God loves us, but neither are we ever alone in our struggle. God will not spare us from the truth, but neither will God ever stop loving us. So let's make a New Year's resolution this year to embody grace and truth in all of our relationships. And then maybe check in with each other every week just to see how we are doing. Be safe, and God bless you.